Alright, this week we'll be discussing what on earth is going on with the government discussing whether farm children should be allowed to do farm chores such as collect eggs and look after chickens. And whilst discussing that, I'm going to be doing some work extending the roof, and also we'll take a beach trip.
Right now in New Zealand, the government is debating whether farm kids should be allowed to collect eggs. Not ride tractors, not use chainsaws, just look after chickens. Is this just a strange story from the edge of the world? Or is it part of something bigger? A world where even the simplest parts of life are seen as problems for the state to solve. And if that's true, we have to ask, how much of our lives do governments believe should be controlled by them? Is this just a local absurdity or a symptom of something bigger? A broader drift where every aspect of our lives, no matter how small, is up for management. I'm thinking about this because I'm building a step out of a big log. Is this up to code? No, but that's the point. Rural life has always been like this. You improvise, you make it work. You use your judgment. And if after a few years this piece of wood rots and falls to pieces, well, then that's on me.
There you go. Step. How it works.
When I was a kid, arriving at your friend's house wasn't about stopping neatly and putting your bike on a stand. It was about jumping off while still moving and letting the bike career off into a hedge. That was the stylish way to arrive, and everyone did it. And years later, living in London, we had the old Routemaster buses that ran down our street. No back door, you just sprinted after it and leapt on while it was still moving. There was no better feeling than opening up your front door and running down the pavement and hopping on. It made you feel alive, and the city felt alive too. Today, not only are eggs up for debate, but the government is running ad campaigns warning us not to fall down the stairs. As if walking itself is now a public safety issue. And we've seen the same shift in parenting. Many of us grew up leaving the house in the morning, only coming back when we were hungry or it got dark. Now parents feel they need to hover. Scheduling playdates, applying sunscreen, smoothing out every risk. Not always because they want to, but because once one parent does it, everyone else must follow, or risk being branded irresponsible. And in a way, governments have started doing the same thing to us. Hovering, regulating, wrapping life in bubble wrap so no one gets bruised. But in the process, teaching us not to trust ourselves. And it's not just in New Zealand. You see this pattern around the world. In America, parents have been investigated for letting their children walk to school alone. In some states, wood stoves are being restricted, raw milk is illegal to sell, and farmers wonder what part of ordinary life will be ruled out next. In Britain, even bonfires and playground swings have been caught up in health and safety rules. And in Australia, questions hang over seeds and rainwater. Different details, but it's the same drift. You could argue that every one of these rules has its reasons. Air quality, public health, safety. It's probably true that there are more rules today than there were in, say, 1950, and in one sense, that's inevitable. As nations advance, they see new problems, new machines, new risks, and they legislate to manage them. But there's a shadow side to that progress. Each layer of protection expands the reach of the rulebook. And over time, rules don't just cover the dangerous. They creep into the ordinary. That's how you end up with governments debating whether farm kids can collect eggs. Each rule makes sense in its own terms, but together they form a pattern, a slow drift away from judgment and towards overreach. What did George Orwell mean when he said, "We have now sunk to a depth at which restatement of the obvious is the first duty of intelligent men"? Could it be that when a society becomes so tangled in ideology, propaganda, or bureaucracy, even the obvious truths get obscured? In such times, it becomes a kind of radical act just to say something plain and self-evident. Farm kids can carry eggs without law. That shouldn't need saying, and I shouldn't need to make a video about it. But the fact that we do shows how far common sense has slipped. What's at stake here isn't the egg basket, it's judgment. Rules scale, wisdom doesn't. It's easy to draft another regulation in a capital city, but wisdom lives in people, in families, in communities. You can't photocopy common sense. You only learn it by living it. As someone once said, useless laws weaken the necessary ones. And maybe that's what we're watching happen now. The more the state tries to legislate the obvious, the less people take any of it seriously. The danger isn't that rules punish us, it's that they train us not to think. I notice it in myself. I used to carry a living map of London in my head, stitched together from years of bike rides. Now I can barely cross the town without using a sat-nav. Offload the job once and the skill starts to atrophy. Rules can do the same thing to judgment. Each time we outsource the decision, we become less capable of making it ourselves. Convenience is a fine servant, but a terrible master. And that's how you drift into places you never meant to go. We're not running out of freedom all at once. We're bleeding it away in tiny, reasonable steps. Each rule sounds harmless on its own. Just one more safeguard, one more consultation, one more form to fill in. None of them feel like tyranny. But keep stacking them up, and one day you wake up and you realise the decisions of daily life are no longer yours at all. Nobody chooses North Korea in a single step. You get there by 1,000 tiny ones, each one wrapped in good intentions. And maybe for us it feels fine. We grew up in a different age. We know how to make our own decisions, and we're perfectly happy to ignore the rules that don't make sense. But the danger isn't really about us. It's about what comes next. Because rules don't just sit on paper, they shape public opinion. They change what the next generation expects. And the more we let these small rules pile up, the more chance we have of quietly redefining what normal life looks like for our nieces, our nephews, our children and grandchildren. But here's the choice that still belongs to us. Whether we keep exercising judgment. Whether we still teach our kids and ourselves to think for ourselves instead of handing that over to somebody else. Because in the end, common sense can't be legislated. It has to be lived.
Firstly, let me know your thoughts on this in the comments. I think it's ridiculous. What do you think? And also, if this kind of thing interests you and you want to take the discussion further, I'll link to a playlist which discusses the kind of relationship between us and the powers that be. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next week.